Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
We've one or two things to be talking about on today's edition. We have US presidential election next Tuesday, and we're probably more interested in what's going on closer to home, with the expectation, Ivan, that you have that the election will be called this coming Thursday, with the date the 29th of November, a Friday.
Yeah, apparently Simon Harris has an important informal council. Back in my day, informal councils were just a piss-up to wine and dine, and they were kind of held every 6 months.
This is the European Council.
Yeah, you know, when you'd have the floating presidency for the year.
Rotating
like in Killarney, I
yeah.
brought them down for a complete piss-off, listowel races and all the rest of it.
All the agriculture
ministers. So the informal is particularly good. So when I heard it was an informal council, that's not so serious. But anyway, the point about it, he has to be in Budapest on Friday morning, so definitely it's going to be Thursday afternoon.
Okay. We'll get into an awful lot of those things in detail next week. We'll do some of it today, but I want to ask you your view on the US presidential election first. We will, in the subscriber podcast, be going into more detail as to why I think a Trump presidency would be bad news for Ireland economically and other issues in relation to that. All of the reasons why I'm suffering from what you'd like to call Trump derangement syndrome. But what's your view now on who you think will win next week?
Well, first of all, both sides are adamant they're going to win. Like I speak to respected people who say that Kamala Harris has momentum and all the rest of it. My default position is the bookmakers' markets. It's hardened a little bit more, not seismically. And sorry, bear in mind that Hillary Clinton was 1-3 to win. And
the bookmakers' markets are often nonsense. They get manipulated by people who put on bets as a form of advertising. It's an investment to try and create an impression that somebody is perhaps doing better than another. Also, there is a theory that, and this doesn't quite apply to you given that you are advancing in age a little bit, but that
65 last week.
The majority of people who gamble are younger, and they tend to be younger male, and the younger men tend to be those who are going for Trump, and that influences the betting markets.
Yeah, look, it focuses on the swing states. Personally, I feel that the signs are there for a retrospective view that Kamala wasn't a great candidate, that the garbage gaffe wouldn't have helped. It was like the deplorables.
The Joe Biden garbage gaffe.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you not noticed how many times Donald Trump over the last number of months has called Kamala Harris's supporters garbage and described people as vermin and scum? And one comment by Joe Biden, who's not a candidate, is somehow worse than all of that.
So different rules apply to Trump. Yeah. Trump is now become an actor on the stage. And if he does something like McDonald's or garbage trucks, it's seen as colour as opposed to sort of a non-politician. This is a key thing of campaigning, to be the anti-politician politician. It used to be drain the swamp or whatever. This is all deliberate. Now, I don't know if it'll pay off. And to be honest with you, when I look at the turnout factor for women and so on, I can see a pathway whereby Kamala will do it. But I can also see that all the warning signs there that Kamala Harris failed to define herself in 3.5 years. Maybe as vice president you can't, but she failed to define herself through the campaign, and that she actually wasn't a great candidate. And a lot of people now dump on Hillary, that she was a bad candidate. I can see the same thing happening. But look, I also think it's a very bad thing for Ireland if Trump gets in because of the tax reshoring whole issue.
And those are things we'll get into in detail in the other podcast. But I just want to say, my Last Word production team are sort of thinking that I'm being perhaps naively optimistic. They've all become quite pessimistic, saying that no matter what Trump says or does, there's no pushback on it. If you go back to 2016, the infamous, and I'm going to say it in full, even if it may be offensive to people, because it was Trump boasting of grabbing by the pussy, that he could do whatever he wanted. You have a whole range of things that he has said and done, that he could go out and shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't actually matter. And none of this. However, I do suspect there has been an overreach in the last week. And there are two key things which I think have actually hurt him. One is you go back to the garbage issue, which all came first of all in this guy, Tony Hinchcliffe, the roast comedian, who was part of an obnoxious display in Madison Square Garden last weekend, a MAGA rally which really tipped over. And I know there are people who say, you can't describe it as fascist, you can't describe it as Nazi. If you look at the list of all of the people who made contributions, it was appalling the way that they actually went over the top And it was misogynist to a large degree against Kamala Harris. How do you know Kamala Harris is stupid? She only opens her mouth. Guffaws. This is coming from Republican congressmen. Okay, you can say that's all part of the act and the rest of it. But this guy, when he went and said them about Puerto Rico in this floating garbage heap out in the Atlantic, there are the numbers. There are about 470,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. All you need is 10,000 of those to take offence who might have been thinking of voting for Trump to vote for Harris. And I think the Democrats now are becoming increasingly confident they're going to win Pennsylvania. And that's a key swing state. The saying is you cannot win the election without winning Pennsylvania. And that may have twisted over to Harris. The second one was something he said in Arizona. And then there's one more after it. But anyway, what he said in Arizona, which was really, again, you can actually say that this has been taken out of context, because he said about women, whether they like it or not. And he was putting it in the context of being protected from the predators who he said are pouring in over the border. Now, what is that little bit of line, whether they like it or not, has been taken out by women and saying, to hell with you, you're not going to give me, you patronising prick. You are not going to actually be telling us that you're our protector, particularly when he has a track record of sexual assault for which he has had to pay serious damages to a woman who in a civil action proved that she was raped by him. There are up to 50 other serious sexual allegations made by him. These things build up and they end up mattering. And then just taking his misogyny a little bit further and also his fascist inclinations, Liz Cheney in his with a sit down with the bizarre Tucker Carlson, and he started speaking about literally aiming guns into her face and getting her to bow down because of that. These are the behaviours that I think an awful lot of decent, honest Americans, even if they're Republicans and they say they're voting Trump, I think in the secrecy of the ballot box, I think a lot of them will reject Trump. And even if they don't particularly like Harris, will think she's preferable to that type of behaviour.
I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't had a bet and won't have a bet. I actually think from America's point of view, the prospect of a week of recounts, court challenges and all is a real horrific threat. The thing has become deeply vexatious beyond the normal level of political sort of competitiveness. I don't know, but put it like this, there are people I've spoken to who I would have regarded as open to Trump but not voting for Trump. I rang 2 or 3 of them during the week and they all said, I said, cut the nonsense, who's going to win? They all said Trump. I don't know. Like Georgia and the different states are going this way. But put it like this, I actually don't have skin in this game. And the truth of it is, nothing would surprise me. Like I was listening to Catty Kay. Like I actually...
But Anthony Scaramucci, you're listening to the rest of his politics.
And I tell you what, you know what she said? Well, there's 3 possibilities. And she said this in all seriousness with her English. One is that there'd be a landslide to Trump, one that there'd be a landslide to Kamala Harris, or one that it'd be a dead heat.
That's like our level of insight.
I thought, for the love of Jesus, woman, where are you coming from? Like, talk about spreading your bets. Like, there is a lot of waffle in these talking heads. So, in my opinion, this we'll talk about.
How many people are cackling listening to us now? Like pots and kettles coming to mind.
Well, I put it like this: if you put me up against a wall, who's going to win? I think Trump will win.
Okay, and maybe I'm just being naively optimistic, but I think that the decency of the American people overall will mean that Harris will win. And I could be proved very wrong. And I expect a bombardment of texts from angry Trump supporters to the last word next week, as I get anytime we talk about America. Before we got back home, I was actually down at the Galway races last weekend. And a couple of things came to mind. I actually realised when I was down in Ballybrit, it was my first time there since the Pope's visit in 1979.
My God.
I have never been horse racing in Galway, but I was quite surprised and taken by the fact that there's only 3 times a year that the racetrack is actually open. July, September and October.
Yeah.
My God, how can you run a racing industry if you have this big complex there which is only available for, or only open for racing 3 times a year? What sort of sport is that?
Well, first of all, the 7-day meeting they have from Monday to Sunday in July,
which you always go to.
Yes, yeah, is the biggest and best attended meeting of the year, and they make enough money out of that. absolutely blockbuster. The other 3 meetings, I'd say, don't wipe their face. The 3 days in September, or 2 days when they go back to school, and the October bank holiday weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
And can I also say
it's a fraction of the crowd.
They were raising funds for breast cancer research down in Galway, and there's extraordinary work being done down there.
I hope you didn't get wet.
I was indoor. The rain was lashing down. But
and it comes in off the bay there, and it's horizontal rain.
It was pouring. It was biblical, the rain. But the actual thing was, and I'd have to confess this, the tipster was doing the tips, and of course,
This was in a box, was it?
No, it was the giant big, it was in the Callanan Suite. It was it was a fundraising function for breast cancer research, right? No, it wasn't the small private box.
There's the prawn cocktails that Rory Keane would be giving out.
There were loads of political candidates there. Grania Shoga was there, Noel Grealish was there, the Mayor of Galway was there. So there were all various people. Former Minister Frank Fahy, I bumped into him as well. But anyway, I have to say, I'm not necessarily trusting the tipsters and nothing. I did text you and I asked you to give me a recommendation. And then, as it happens, I ended up having a lengthy conversation with Grania Shoga and other people. And I didn't realise that the phone, you'd texted back. Yeah. And when I opened it up and I saw your recommendation, it was for the first race and the horses were running around.
Mozzie's sister, and only got up in the shadow of the post. It looked like it was beaten. I backed it the night before.
And it won.
Yeah.
And then I texted you to say that I'd missed that.
No, I was at Wexford races. I was busy.
I didn't get anything back. I didn't get any recommendation for the rest of the day.
Two things about that. One, I didn't fancy any of the horse. But secondly, I was busy in Wexford.
And did you win down in Wexford?
I backed. The only bet I had was Mozzie's sister, and then I had a decent bet on Chelsea to beat Newcastle.
The other thing I want to ask you about, and it was the death, which was announced this week, of David Davin-Power, the former RT Northern editor, then political correspondent, until he was forced by his age to retire about 5 or 6 years ago from RT. But he continued to contribute, I think, to programmes that you presented and write for the likes of The Independent and
Times. Sunday Times.
I actually have to say, I didn't know him well at all. He would not have been somebody that I would ever, I don't think I've ever socialised with him, never had any lengthy conversations. There's been lots of tributes been paid by friends, particularly in RT, who are deeply upset by the news at the age of only 72 that he has passed. But I believe he would have been a bit of a drinking companion of yours, would he?
Well, that covers half the country. But I mean, the first of all, DDP was a bit of a legend. The last time I met him, we had Christmas lunch together with a mutual friend, David Harvey, in the Ivy. And that was a kind of regular thing. Also, David hosts this Nova. Nova was closed down by the Blue Shirts, Jim Mitchell, back in the 80s.
The original Nova, because there is a new Nova.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so all the former DJs, which includes Dobbo and all those, and I was never part of that, have this annual absolutely outrageous drinking session.
How did you insinuate yourself into
because I'm a friend of David Harvey's, and they did roasting of me. So David and I used to sit together at that. So a couple of things. When he started Morning Ireland in 1984, I was regularly on the show, and I'd always be hoping I'd get David DDP, because David Hanley would be very waspish. He could be hungover, whatever. And the point is, he was a very difficult guy, cranky, cantankerous. So then he took a very brave decision. He in 1989 he left to go to the impresario
Oliver Barry, Century Radio.
Set it up. He was director of news, and David Harvey was working under him then. It flopped. And he found a way back to RT, but had to go to the purgatory of Belfast as Northern Ireland correspondent.
Why are you describing that as purgatory? That would have been a job that was very exciting.
Yeah, of course. So he was there from 91 right up to the Good Friday Agreement, and then came back and was a Paul Core. Really upset he was in 2017 when he was told he had to retire. He got married a second time, so he had young kids and to Dervla and all of that. First of all, so I'd get him in the hard shoulder or whatever, and he'd take off his jacket and he'd have braces, and so I'd do a riff and then he'd say, right. So I said we've here to have a rule of Boolia, David Davin-Power, former esteemed household figure, and well, everything you said is total nonsense, and he'd wind it up.
Oh, he actually spotted you for what you are.
He did, and he gave me a hard time. But I always enjoyed his company. He improved with a bottle of wine. I was shocked because I actually wasn't aware he was ill. So David rang me on yesterday.
He'd been
Thursday.
writing up until the middle of September.
Yeah.
For the
So basically, apparently, he had serious cancer in his stomach and it spread to his lungs. And it was very, very sad. And I actually thought he was 68, he was 72. But put it like this, really, like there's a group of sort of Stephen Collins, him and so on, Tim Ryan I'd put in the group, who've retired. You would know them all, journalists.
Yeah.
And so when I was going through a phase a year ago saying, wake up, Sinn Féin are going to get 50 seats, they were absolutely venomous towards me because they thought I was touting for Sinn Féin, whereas, if the data changes, I change. But so they actually believed this was impossible and wrong and anti-democratic.
And they were right and you were wrong.
Well, put it like this. That's what they say now. But the point is this, I was shocked to hear he died, and I put it like this, they don't make him like DDP anymore. Like he was a great guy.
Well, our condolences to everyone who
Dervla
loved
and
him.
5 kids, yeah.
So, okay. Let's be very careful in what we talk about next.
Okay.
You're looking at
I'm
me
never
now.
careful.
Well, this time I want you to be careful because in previous podcasts we've had to do slight edits in relation to our coverage of Brian Stanley and what's going on with Sinn Féin. Much of what we knew, which we didn't say on air, actually came out last weekend after we had recorded the podcast. We knew all about, but we couldn't because we didn't have concrete proof, and because we're responsible people on this podcast, talk about the issue of the woman making the allegations about the hotel bedroom, the pillow in the middle of the bed, which I had sort of alluded to at the end of last week's podcast, and how this all was playing out. The one bit that actually stunned me when I saw the reports by both Pat Leahy in the Irish Times and Maeve Sheehan in the Independent was about her demand for 60,000 going away money, which was a quite extraordinary twist, that she was looking for 6 envelopes with 10 grand apiece in them, not to make this known, and then the delay. So I suppose, without getting into the rights and wrongs of all of this, because there are some people, commentators, saying, Sinn Féin have handled it all very well. There are others who are saying Sinn Féin have not handled this well at all. What's it going to mean in the Laois constituency now that Laois Offaly has gone from being a 5-seater into 2 3-seater constituencies? Now that Brian Stanley has said that he is going to run as an independent Republican, what do you think the chances are that he will regain the seat, or retain the seat, and that Sinn Féin will be left without a seat there?
Okay, I think this is going to work out okay for Brian Stanley. And when the details came out, which is the leaking of the draft Sinn Féin investigation into this, where there was disputes about certain key evidence, but in the report, in the reports of the report, and I quote, "There is no suggestion of any physical engagement or anything of an illegal nature," quote unquote. But
which is very important.
Yes, and the conclusion was that what the complainant said was essentially true. But the complainant did subsequent interviews with the media and did not deny that she sought 6 envelopes amounting to 60,000 in cash. She says that was a lack of judgment. Well, put it like this, I think it does affect her credibility and motivation. The second issue is this, that if you or I have been involved in anything of this nature where there's an allegation of this type, why would you wait from October to July to pursue that, to lodge a complaint? So she waits until the opening of nominations for the Laois constituency. To answer your question directly, so I think there are credibility questions. Put it like this, Brian Stanley has apologised. It wasn't his finest hour. These things happen. But is it a hanging offence? If that is the question, I think 2 things. One, that this is not the most competitive constituency in the country. In fact, it's an extra seat because there was 5 in Laois Offaly where it was absolutely everyone going hammer and tongs, parties looking for second seats. In this situation, Sean Fleming will top the poll. He is close to Portlaoise. Charlie Flanagan is out, and this guy who's been a councillor at the same time I was a councillor, Willie Aird, the youngest councillor, is now having 5 terms as a councillor, standing for the Dáil. He is a 1-term TD because he's quite a veteran and so on. Not that competitive. you look around, where is there Soc Dems, Labour's, a Sinn Féin candidate? They're non-existent. So I think, given that he topped the poll in the last election, I think he can drop a third of his vote, still get elected. I'm struggling to see, because the only public representative, there was, I think, an Aidan Cummins who fell out with the party. The only candidate that is a councillor potentially is Carol Dwan Stanley. So I think
Brian Stanley's wife.
Yeah, so there is
not going to run.
There is
Sinn
no
Féin.
credible Sinn Féin campaign here, unlike Kildare South. So the reality is, I think, the situation is it's still one of the most predictable constituencies. It'll be Fleming, Aird and Stanley. And that actually the Garda inquiry is the big question. Will the result of that come before polling day?
One other thing just before we take the break on Sinn Féin. It was interesting, I thought, that last week, the Sunday Business Post, the Business Post, I have to drop the Sunday, the Business Post Red Sea poll only had Sinn Féin down 1% on the back of all this, was down to 17%, which goes to my thing that I've been saying to you over the last couple of weeks as to how much does this type of stuff actually cut through with the general voter? How much notice do they actually pay to it? And, is this now sort of one that, okay, that's baked in? David Cullinane on The Last Word on Tuesday, because it was the bank holiday weekend, after Sinn Féin had launched their health programme. And it was very interesting. I mean, the one thing I will say for David Cullinane, he brought it up himself in the interview, was that, he has held about 150 meetings over the last few years with all sorts of interested parties in the health sector. One thing I'll definitely say for David Cullinane, he has done his homework. Mm-hmm. Whatever you might think of the prescriptions he is now setting out for how to sort out the health service, he has most certainly done the work. And as he referenced, I've interviewed him at one conference and he was very on top of everything. A couple of things came out of their health thing. Well, one was that they're talking about by the end of a 5-year term of government, health spending would have increased by another 4.5 billion quid. They'd be up to 30 billion. But I put that to Pascal Donoghue on radio the following day. And, he didn't commit to the timeline. He more or less conceded, well, actually, with the ageing demographics, with the increased population, that's the way we're heading. And it makes you wonder, like, Jesus, where are we going with all of this? Where's all the money going to come from to do all this? Is it going to be if the corporation taxes start declining, that they're going to have to be more income taxes to pay for the health bills? And it does raise the question again, it's like, why has nobody been able to have more cost effectiveness within the health system? That, surely by investment in things like artificial intelligence and the rest of it, you could save enormous amounts of money on the administration of the health system. But we're years and years and years behind on normal technology, let alone technology of the future. And the other thing briefly, which he brought in, which I don't know if that was going to work. I mean, I can see the logic in the state employing GPs all over the country rather than there being sole traders. But I wonder where they're going to find all of the doctors to do that. And also, they're talking about 40,000 extra people working in the health service. Where are those people going to come from if we don't import them?
Yeah, so I read the health proposals from Sinn Féin. I would consider them serious. I would consider David Cullinane a serious politician. I think outside of the border counties, he possesses the best opportunity of a second seat, even in these declined circumstances. Conor McGuinness in Dungarvan to get the second seat.
Because he's actually the only candidate in that part of the constituency, I think.
Well, put it like this. That's true. That's true. Mary Butler's from Portlaw, John Cummins is from Waterford, Matt Shanahan is not too far from. He is, but yes. But the point I would make is this, and they got 7 councillors elected in Waterford, which is down to Cullinane's. He and Owen O'Brien are the 2 politicians who've carried the ground war in their constituency and the national profile and policy work.
Sorry, just on that Waterford constituency, just going to say, so you have Matt Shanahan, independent, who maybe would have been doubtful a year ago, maybe it could be confident now of getting back in. You have David Cullinane, a certainty. Mm-hmm. So then you'd have one Fianna Fáil, will Fine Gael...
Mary Butler is Fianna Fáil.
Will she keep her seat?
Yes, I think so.
Will Fine Gael then be in
John
competition?
Cummins, so they're only running one candidate.
Yeah, so if he gets a seat, does that mean Sinn Féin don't get a second? Or who, if Sinn Féin are to get a second seat, who will get knocked out? Matt Shanahan, Mary Butler or the Fine Gael person?
I think it's Matt versus Sinn Féin. I think that There's lots of Labour, Soc Dem and other candidates, lady candidates in the Waterford area. But at the end of the day, I think Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil will win a seat. If Harris doesn't get a seat here, there is no Harris bounce. They got no seat here the last time. So Sinn Féin.
The point you're going to say on the health.
Yeah. So anyway, I think Matt and Conor McGuinness will fight out the last seat. Now, first of all, there's very little in this that isn't in the Sláinte Care report. Secondly, it's throwing 4.3 billion more at the health service with not a lot of value for money. It promises 5,000 new hospital beds, 40,000 additional healthcare workers. Is this not conventional throwing money at the problem? I'm not saying that that's not required with the ageing demographic and the growth in population, but put it like this. Jesus, the two of us on a word processor could do that without 150 meetings. You know what I mean? In other words, just the recipe is just spend more money. I just when the Apple and the other tech giants' money dries up after 2030, where will all these people? They'll be found to be swimming without their trunks on, as Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out.
We need to take a break. We'll be back with lots more in Path to Power, the podcast, after this. Welcome back to the second part of our podcast. Okay, you have been talking to loads of people, Ivan. You have stories you want to tell. Is the Michael Healy-Rae story that you want to tell me podcastable?
Yes. So, because of the in-depth work, I'm trying to predict all the 174 TDs on the next Dáil and the revised constituencies. It is very detailed work. So, just a couple of things.
We're very impressed by how much of a swat you are, Ivan.
No, I will put it like this. This is beyond a joke. So I met the sock.
I'm very sorry if you're offended by me.
No, sorry. No, it's actually causing me, like I spent 30 hours on this week. So Michael Healy-Rae.
But this is all an investment in your bets, isn't it?
Well, I haven't had a bet. No, the markets on these are very thin. So Michael Healy-Rae, I ring him up and I talk to him and I say...
Oh, is he talking to you again?
Oh, yeah, no, he's always talking to me.
You once threw a pen at Michael Healy-Rae on the set of the Tonight Show.
But it was all a bit theatrical.
Well, it was. It was a bit of
like
your
he said to me afterwards, well, make sure to do that again because it's great for ratings.
It was your Eamon Dunphy and Egypt moment. Hang on now a second. He wasn't after us. He was not happy and he threatened not to come back on the show again. And then you had to have a rapprochement 10 minutes before he was due to come on air on a subsequent night. And it nearly broke into a row that I actually thought we were not going to have him on the air. And I actually had to stand in on your behalf and tell Michael to behave himself.
That's all true. But what I would say is I gave him what I call an Ivan apology. I'm sorry, Matt, if you're upset. In other words, a non-apology.
Anyway,
okay.
Go back to your conversation with him.
No, the Michael Healy-Rae story. So I got in touch with them for a read on Kerry. And I said, well, look, the Healy-Raes have 19,000 votes. You know, you'd be safe enough yourself. And I said, look, Norma Foley will get elected. Pa Daly will get elected. I really want to talk to you about the fifth seat. And he said, stop. He said, stop, Ivan, stop. There you go again. And he actually was foaming at the mouth. He said, I want to tell you about my father, Jackie, and the time, and he lost his seat by 40 votes, he said. And you know what? It wasn't that he was disliked. It wasn't that he hadn't done the work. It was that everyone said he was safe. And I'm telling you now, he said, now Danny will be all right because people don't think... He said, I could be in terrible trouble here. And I said, okay, now can we now talk about the fifth seat? And so, but like he also gave me good insights in that. First thing I want to tell you about is this. So this is all entirely ground war stuff, ground game stuff. Just here's 5 independents that are really coming on my radar of. So if I want to know about an independent, I will ask not that candidate. I'll ask Fine Gael, I'll ask Fianna Fáil.
Sorry, hold on a second. Did you get who the 5th person who's going to win in Kerry is?
Well, but put it like this, I can't attribute things to him because I spoke to other people. But what I detected, and I want to talk to you about organisation, that the Fine Gael campaign with Billy O'Shea is in trouble there. And I think that Michael Cahill of Fianna Fáil, who's a long-standing 25-year-old councillor, I think he could get a seat and that Fianna Fáil would take the Fine Gael seat as the last seat. But I'll come back to that. 2
Fianna Fáil. 2 Healy-Raes and 1 Sinn Féin.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Apparently none of the councillors in Fine Gael who would have been supporting Tommy Griffin and others, they're only there for the photo op. They're not there for the canvas. And there's some suggestion that Billy O'Shea, who has no background in politics, he never stood for election before, he wasn't on the council.
But he was a good Gaelic footballer.
In 1997 he won one All-Ireland, which in Kerry terms is pretty low strike rate. But anyway, the point, I've nothing against him. He's from Killorglin, but what I'm hearing is he's not getting the traction on the ground and his campaign is looking like a solo effort. The point I was going to make, that was just a Healy-Rae story. I have come across, so you would say in Fingal East it is, Fingal West. So there has to be a government seat. Lorraine Clifford Lee or Grace Boland, one will transfer to the other. So what I'm looking at...
Lorraine Clifford Lee been Fianna Fáil, Grace Boland been Fine Gael.
A senator, yeah.
Sorry, some of our listeners do at times ask us to identify the parties that they're because they're not as clued in as you are.
So I have said, in the Olympia and elsewhere, that Rob O'Donoghue will get in. And I've been saying that Louise O'Reilly will get in, although she mightn't get the first seat. What's starting to emerge is that there's this councillor from Balbriggan who did really well in the local elections, who's ex-Fine Gael, called Tony Murphy, and he could eat their lunch. In Louth constituency, where Fianna Fáil have no seat and are running Senator Erin McGreen up in the Cooley Peninsula, you have to have 43,000 voters in Dundalk, 36,000 in Drogheda under your belt. She neither connects to that. Alison Common, I hear, is not connecting. Unbelievably, Fianna Fáil could end up with no seat thanks to the new emerging star, independent in Drogheda, Kevin Callan. So these are people the public will not have heard of. Tony Murphy, Kevin Callan. In Mayo, don't rule out, there's an independent Ireland candidate, Chris Maxwell, running in Westport, that he could transfer to Patsy O'Brien, who topped the poll in Clare Morris.
And Fine Gael have done the very dodgy strategy of four candidates.
Absolutely.
Which is,
Now, here's one definite. Both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Sinn Féin said to me, your old friend, you Deputy Stagg, Paul Gogarty is going to get elected. He got 3,600 votes. He stood in 2 local electoral layers. He got elected to one and very nearly made it a double timer. He didn't quite
sing it.
So anyway, so Paul Gogarty is right up there. And so there's 3 TDs, and I talk about Finglas West, Finglas East. So the 3 outgoing TDs, Dara O'Brien, Fianna Fáil, Alan Farrell and Duncan Smith. On balance, I think they'll get elected. Who is snapping at their heels, if that's to be an upset, particularly for the Labour side? It'll be Dean Mulligan, the Clare Daly candidate. So here you have a situation. And then in Dublin...
So whose expense? Because I think Duncan Smith has a very strong local personal base there. So, it's not a Labour Party base necessarily, it's a Duncan Smith support.
Yeah, there would have been Brendan Ryan there over the years and so on. But what I'm saying is this, I actually think the 3 TDs will hold on. But if there's to be an upset, it's independent Dean Mulligan. The other one I want to bring to your attention that I wouldn't have alluded to before is in Tala, Dublin Southwest. So I've been saying Kieran Ahern of Labour, and because I don't think Sinn Féin, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil get a second seat. People said to me from all parties, Ivan, take a look at this councillor Alan Edge, independent, that it would be sort of out of the Zappone camp. He, I think, works for the LGBT community. He's in the NGO world. But the fact of the matter is, all people are saying, be it Rathfarnham or whatever, that he is an emergency. So here you have a situation.
Jesus, how many independents at this stage do you think might be having the next
What I'm trying to say to you is this, that
40?
Like, and let's be clear, in all of these cases, I have not spoken to these themselves. It's hearsay from other people who don't want them to win. So I think that's always a rock solid kind of accreditation of someone that your opponents are speaking well of you. What I'm saying is that whatever way we go, there will be at least 50 new faces that you'll be interviewing on The Last Word that have never seen the inside of Leinster House before.
Okay, you've also been doing a bit of a deep dive into the Soc Dems, haven't you?
Yes.
Is Holly Kearns going to save her seat?
She is. I've changed my mind about that. I think it's Michael Collins, it's Holly Kearns in a dogfight between FF and FG. In fact, that's a bellwether of who's going to do better, FF or FG. In Munster, I'm leaning towards Fianna Fáil. In Dublin, I'm leaning towards Fine Gael. But you asked me about the Soc Dems. The thing that I found interesting, because I've been speaking to you about... Oh, right. So I met the Greens, I met Labour, and I've had I speak to the Director of Elections, I speak to maybe some of their apparatchiks. the thing I found about the Soc Dems, there was a distinguishing feature, because all those three, you know what I call the Aon or Reardon route, whoever is top of the pile, they'll get transfers from that trio, right? And they have a pathway to get a seat in any 4 or 5 seater. That the Soc Dems are the most transfer friendly. And so therefore, people before profit exclusion, they'll get transfers. Sinn Féin, they, weak candidate, they will get transfers. Labour and even the government parties. Now, this is because they are doing the best trick you need to do in politics, which is to face in 2 directions at the one time. It's clear, in my opinion, Labour will go into government. It's clear Sinn Féin and PWP would not go in to prop up Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil. So therefore you have a choice, either on the spectrum of left, how left you want to go, state companies, all that kind of good stuff. The Soc Dems, it's not clear whether they go into government. So I was asking them about that. I said, just tell me straight, are you going to go into government? You get 10 seats, you hold the balance of power. And they said, well, it's subject to red lines. So it's as clear as mud. And so therefore, so the position is whatever you're having yourself on the day. So that is great for transfers, but it may not be good for... so they have some ringing...
See, it's funny you say with the red lines, sorry, just forget it, because I saw something I put to David Cullinane the other day. I said, you have your health plan and the rest of it and stuff, but you're not going to be in government on your own. You might not even be in government, but just say you're in government. What are the things on it you're prepared to concede? Because I think this is the thing with the nature of that we don't have single party government in this country ever more or ever likely to. They make all these sort of promises and then they go into negotiations with potential coalition partners and they water everything down.
Well, the USP of Sinn Féin and People for Profit is there's no way, no day, and it's mutual. They'll be propping up Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil. So, just to summarise the Soc Dem situation, some people who are going to get big votes and consolidate their position. Cian O'Callaghan, Gary Gannon, Holly.
So you're confident about Gary Gannon in Dublin Central, even now with the emergence of Clare Daly?
I think it's NASA Hurricane is in trouble there.
Of the Green Party.
So Jennifer Whitmore. So they have, in my opinion, 5 bankers that are going to do even better. So then we get into the probables and possibles.
Yeah, they're going to be able to retain the seats particularly from their outgoing co-leaders of the past, Roisin Shortall and Catherine Murphy.
Yeah, I got a great description of Aidan Feeney, who's, it's Rao Bill Clare is from Naas and Bill Clare is standing as independent, which they wouldn't have liked. But Aidan Feeney is being put in to replace Catherine Murphy, and it's from the same part of the Leixlip, Maynooth, Selbridge area. Someone described to me as soulless and preachy and a negative outlook. So put it like this, I don't know the guy, but that's
very unfair to say if you don't know him.
This was someone who I would regard as accurate. I think he has to get elected. When I look at it, Fine Gael are talking about 2 seats and different. I think Rory Ahern completely different. So I think Paul McAuliffe will get elected. I think Desi Ellis will get elected. And I'm just not convinced that
Rory Ahern is former People Before Profit councillor, candidate in local elections. Hasn't been elected, I think, anywhere to the best of my knowledge. He's a professor in Maynooth University. And no offence to anyone who's a professor in Maynooth University, but we did get a text message in there recently to the last word saying, is there anyone who's a professor in Maynooth who isn't a mad lefty? Is it the mad lefty university?
But
I thought that was Galway.
This is the roughest, toughest constituency. Finglas, Ballymun. I'm just wondering how a Waterford-born, Marino-living doctor with an academic pedigree on housing is going to connect on the ground. Doesn't live in the constituency. And you know what I heard? There was 3 Soc Dem ladies did really well in the local elections and got elected. And there was now you step aside. We have decided we're going to parachute a candidate in there. I'm looking at an amber flashing light that Roisin will not be able to deliver that seat to someone else. People said, I voted for Roisin all my life. It was a personal vote, is not a transferable vote.
Okay, there's one other thing that I want to talk about. And of course, there will be lots on the subscriber edition, which you can get by going to pathtopowerpodcast.com.
Just one sentence. The bellwether constituency, because I want to give a bellwether for the bellwether constituency for Soc Dems is Cork East. If Liam Quaid gets in, that's a very achievable target. So watch out for him and you'll see what type of day the Soc Dems are having.
Now, on the subscriber edition, we have lots in relation to your questions been answered. I'll be talking a bit more in detail about what's going on in the US presidential election, how it is important to Ireland. And what I want to ask you about now, though, is I'm fascinated. It was the lead story in the Irish Independent Friday morning. And it was about the Greens and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael being at odds over what Eamon Ryan, I think, wants to do on the way out, is put new taxes in place in relation to motoring because of climate needs. And it did strike me as that the Greens must have known that there was no chance whatsoever that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil would agree to something like that just coming into a general election, that it would be political suicide to suddenly start announcing the levying of extra taxes on motoring. So the Greens knew that, but they're just trying to emphasise the point of difference that they have with the two main parties. And the two main parties are quite happy at this stage to say, well, we won't be needing you again. You won't have anyone available to us practically after the next election. So one of the most amusing things over the next couple of weeks could be seeing the government parties taking shots at each other. Hazel Chu had a go about the idea of childcare facilities in buildings that were not suitable for immigrants. So how could they be suitable for childcare facilities? And I suspect that you will see a big move, particularly from Jack Chambers, who I believe, I'm told, is quite exercised about it in relation to the cap at Dublin Airport as well in advance of the election.
Yeah, my line on this is don't let the door hit your arse on the way out. The fact of the matter is FF and FG both see gain for them in being positively anti-green, disowning them and actually looking for rows. We saw it in the European elections. Regina Doherty spouts up. And all these cycle lanes, I'm getting it in the neck at the doorstep about, road space allocation that hasn't worked. Nobody's on these cycle lanes, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm saying there is that the Greens, like you'd say that Catherine Murphy and Roderick O'Gorman have to hold their seats.
Martin,
because there's an extra seat in their constituency.
I don't know about Catherine Martin being safe.
When I talk to the head honchos in Fine Gael and different places, they're not saying that. They're saying, not so sure. And you just know by the, they're not going to say straight out she's going to lose her seat, but certainly they're saying that, cannibalising the Greens is where this game is at.
It's funny, actually, and as we record this podcast on Friday morning, I'm not sure whether the Greens have made anyone available to come on The Last Word Friday afternoon to talk about this relation to motor cars. But earlier in the week, on Tuesday, I had the idea that I wanted to do when they were announcing their Director of Elections, Pauline O'Reilly, that we essentially started our election coverage last Tuesday, and we did with David Cullinan, and then on Wednesday we had Pascal Donoghue. But on Tuesday I wanted to give Roderick O'Gorman a bit of time and space to talk about environmental issues and all the rest of it and stuff. We kept leaving messages with his people. Nobody would answer the phone or respond to text messages or whatever. We were actually offering...
Did this hurt your feelings?
No, it didn't hurt my feelings in the least. We ended up with arguably better material on the programme. But I was
now I can see your feelings are hurt. Okay.
But I just thought, my God, they're coming into an election and they're not answering messages.
You'd think they'd send someone else, yeah.
Or they would have got back in touch and said, well, we can't do it. But I actually worked it out after.
Hell has no fury like Matt Jilted. That's what I'm looking at.
I'll tell you what it was, though. It was the day of the reports about the 53 missing children under Tusla, and he was pressed at the launch with questions and wouldn't answer the questions. There are a lot of things that I think he's probably going to be very sensitive about in relation to answering in a campaign. So I'm sure he'll have to come out. He'll have to come out. He can't be avoiding interviews. And if they want to avoid interviews and think that they win seats that way, good luck to them. Yeah,
well, put it like this. In Dublin West, I certainly get the feeling that Paul Donnelly's Sinn Féin and the Sinn Féin campaign, that Ruth Coppinger's campaign is going to be less about Leo and Fine Gael and going to be more about sticking it to the Greens and using the sweet spot of migration, of childcare issues and so on. Look, he lost 2 councillors there. Put it like this. I actually think about the Greens. Look, get over it. This has happened twice in our history before. Roger Garland topping the poll, losing his seat in the next election. Eamon Ryan losing his seat. The fact of the matter is that as predictable as the tide in Sandymount Beach. The tide comes in for the Greens and it goes out. And it's on the way out.
Tides aren't predictable as much as they used to be. Okay, they come twice a day, but they can be higher. They're carrying. And when you think about it, when you see what happened in Spain and Valencia this week, there are people who will say, like, hang on a second, how can climate change?
I heard you and John Gibbons nattering on about that. I said, Jesus,
I'm delighted to know you're...
Is there nothing I can flick onto that'll give me a bit more entertainment than another we'll all be dead by Christmas and die roaring with the starving and the floods and the tempest and the storm that's coming our way?
But I'm still
give me a break.
But I'm still positive enough to think Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. Okay, we will leave it there for this edition of Path to Power. Don't forget, we have our subscriber edition as well, where we continue talking about events.
I have some really juicy stuff. Will there be a far-right TD? And to define what is a good political machine organisation.
Much to hear on that. Please join us on that. It's only the price of a pint, depending on what part of the country you're in. Until the next time, from me, Matt Cooper.
And from me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you for being with us.